Hello and welcome back to a very special, very late video. My review of the new-ish Sufjan Stevens album, The Ascension. I teased this a little bit several months ago, I think back in September. But it never happened. This has been a really rough year as far as motivating myself to make videos for this channel. But I'm going to try to end the year and begin the new one on a relatively high note with a series of a couple videos I'm planning. By the time this gets uploaded, the Ween Worst to Best will probably be up, and I hope you all enjoy that. But I really want to get some reviews done that I should have been doing all year. It's going to happen. I'm going to do a top 10 albums of the year. And I'm probably playing with fire a little bit by even talking about Sufjan Stevens, because spoilers, this is going in the top 5. But you know what? I said I was going to do it. I'm going to do it. You're probably going to get a review for the new Fleet Foxes, maybe even the new Paul McCartney in the next couple days from me. It should hopefully be a little winter holiday special type deal, because I didn't find any Christmas albums to review this year. Although one of these years I've got to review the Jethro Tull Christmas album. It needs to happen. The Ascension. This album, I've been looking forward to this album all year. The first single dropped sometime in the spring, or at least I think it was the first single. I believe it was America. And I was really taken aback by that track, because it was kind of what I was expecting in terms of the bleakness after Carrie and Lowell, you know. But it was more electronic. It sounded a little bit more like the stuff on The Age of Odds, but more minimal, a little more repetitive, even a little punchier, a little more direct and to the point, as opposed to the sprawling, sort of bombastic electronic weirdness that was The Age of Odds. And then I started to hear that he was comparing it to Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, which is an album that I feel like a lot of people who like Sufjan Stevens probably haven't heard, or maybe I'm misjudging people who are Sufjan Stevens fans. I don't know. We're living in a crazy upside-down world where the values that quote-unquote music snobs such as myself hold have been turned upside down, and I've never fully entirely adapted to them myself, so who knows? Anyway, that comparison intrigued me, because any Janet Jackson is very different from anything I've heard from Sufjan Stevens so far. And so as the album got closer and closer and a few tracks drifted out, I was very, very intrigued. And then it came out, and I got it. First things first, I want to clear this off the table, because I'll probably never talk about it again. I love the cover art. The cover art is just great. I love the aesthetic of the inside. At some point, I do probably want to get this on vinyl, just because it is such a beautiful cover art, and because, spoilers, I really liked the album. But I didn't on first listen, and that was kind of what I was getting to. The album is like The Age of Odds, but not like The Age of Odds at all. It's extremely electronic, probably the most electronic thing he's done since, honestly, Enjoy Your Rabbit, all the way back in 2003. Even more so than The Age of Odds, because The Age of Odds still had some acoustic guitars and standard sort of indie folk instrumentation. This has little hints of that throughout, but for the most part, it is very synth-heavy, very percussion-centric. There's a lot of drum machine type tracks. When I say that, I mean using drum machines to make loops and that kind of thing. I don't. My musical vocabulary is sometimes not what it really needs to be. And the songs are very repetitive for the most part. You know, they're not as spacey as some of the stuff on Carrie and Lowell. They're not as all over the place and multi-part as some of the stuff on Age of Odds and All Delighted People. They're very drony, for lack of a better term, and on first listen that put me off a little bit, and also the lyrics put me off, because this is probably, if not the darkest album he's ever made. It's one of the darkest. The only thing that keeps it from being the darkest is the fact that Carrie and Lowell exists, and is so achingly personal, whereas this, which is also very achingly personal, this is a much broader album. Carrie and Lowell is very specifically about Sufjan's mother's death and his relationship with her and dealing with that loss. Whereas this album feels like Sufjan Stevens looking at everything that's wrong with the world and everything he doesn't like about himself, and looking at it in a more broad and maybe even more oblique way. Like you can read, like, America, for example. You can read America in a couple of different ways. It's definitely about a crisis of faith, about, a struggle with belief. Is he talking about America? Is he talking about not believing in the United States anymore? Or is he talking about God? Is he talking about, losing your faith in God with all of the horror that's going on around us in, the year of our Lord 2020? But there's also stuff I really like Ativan. Ativan is probably one of the strongest Sufjan Stevens tracks I've heard in a really long time. I wouldn't necessarily say that it has the most memorable melody, but the lyrics, for the most part, are really strong. There's a line that I'm not going to quote directly because, nobody is ever going to watch this video anyway, and I don't want the viewing figures to go down even further. But there's a really awkward and funny line in there that actually works in the context of the song. Like, you read it on paper, you're like, he really sings this? But when you listen to the song, it fits. He also does the John Wayne Gacy Jr. thing, the thing he did in this Song of That Name on the Illinois album, where he compares himself to Buffalo Bill. There's a line about, it puts the lotion in the bag, or something like that, in that song that's very good. As far as other favorites of mine, I would say, the opening, Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse, Lamentations, Die Happy is really good as well. That does the sort of the classic Sufjan multi-part thing really well. Landslide is one of my favorites too. Death Star and Gilgamesh are great as well. And then The Ascension is beautiful. The Ascension is very different from the rest of the album. It's sort of a more acoustic ballad. It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of Feudal Devices on the Age of Odds, whereas, Feudal Devices kind of baits and switches you because you open up the album with this beautiful, heartfelt acoustic ballad, and then it goes straight into the title track, and it's just bombastic, maximalist, just bleeping electronic orchestral noise in your face. Whereas this, The Ascension feels more like a breather in the scope of the album. It feels more like a moment to contemplate what we've gone through and, consider what Sufjan has put on the table for us before you get to the closing 12 and a half minutes that is America. And yeah, this is an album that really had to grow on me, because when I first listened to it, I didn't like it. I didn't dislike it. I didn't think it was a bad album, but I wasn't feeling the immediacy the way I felt with some of his other albums. Like the first time I listened to Illinois, Illinois impressed me a lot. There was a lot of stuff on Illinois, like John Wayne Gacy Jr. or Casimir Pulaski Day. The first time I listened to The Age of Odds, I was impressed by a lot of it. Even if one of my takeaways was, oh my God, how long is Impossible Soul? And then Carrie and Lowell, the first time I listened to it, and this is going to probably make me sound unhinged, but I don't know. I was in tears by the end of the third track. Whereas this, it caught me off guard, even though I kind of knew what to expect. it still caught me off guard. And it's been a minute since an album caught me off guard in a way that turned out to be positive. Usually when that happens, it winds up meaning that I don't like the album that much, and I'm going to come to terms with that fact slowly over the course of the next several weeks and months. But in this case, it was actually more like the opposite. I started revisiting like Ativan and Video Game. Video Game, I should have mentioned, that was one of the singles too. Video Game is very interesting too. Like that, Landslide, Death Star. I started listening to the album in full more, and eventually it grew on me enormously to the point where, as I said, it's going to be in the top 5 for this year in general. But like I said, it took a minute to get there. Something I do like about this album and the production style on this album is that, he was comparing it to 80s Janet Jackson, and I was a little worried because, 80s retro style production is everywhere right now. It's been everywhere for like the past 6 or 7 years. This whole synthwave, I don't even know what to call it, everywhere. I'm getting tired of it. I was tired of it 2 years ago, honestly, because the first time I really started to feel like I'm sick of this was probably when MGMT dropped their last album. Even though the last MGMT album was one of their absolute best, so I was a little concerned. I was like, is he just gonna do the thing everybody's doing? And he mostly doesn't. He uses the synths really differently than most people are using those kind of synths and drum machines. Like, yeah, you could, if you're really sick of synthesizers right now, I could see you not liking this, but he doesn't do what Smashing Pumpkins just did, of using the faux retro 80s stuff in a way that's obnoxious. And honestly, this album doesn't even sound that 80s, At most, I could say it reminds me of the stuff I like from that late 80s moment where industrial music kind of crept into the pop scene for a little bit, and you got stuff like Rhythm Nation that was a little more percussive and loop-centric as opposed to pop hooks. But other than that, So all in all, I really like this. As I said earlier, standout tracks, Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse, Video Game, Lamentations, Ativan, Landslide, Death Star, and The Ascension. Those are the tracks I would send you to listen to first from this album. And I liked it very much. I liked it more than I thought I would, honestly. And I am going to give this, I rate things pretty highly. It's been a thing on this channel for a long time. I rate things pretty highly. I hand out 8s and 9s like they're candy. I'm going to give this an 8.5. I'm going to give this an 85 out of 100. So an 8.5 out of 10. And I think you should check this out? Yes, I do. This gets the Rustic Reviewer seal of approval, to use the name of this channel that is now like a vestigial organ hanging off of something that no longer needs it. Anyway, you all have a nice day, and I will see you later with some new videos. New Fleet Foxes, new Paul McCartney, everything I promised you in the opening. But until then, I will see you all later.